Hey guys, welcome. This is xBenJamminx from DailyRotosharks.com, and we have a very, very special guest with us today. This is Roman Edmond, also known as LongBottoms, the FanDuel World Champion for NFL from last year. So everybody say hi and welcome in Roman. World Champion for NFL from last year, and we have a very, very special guest with us today. This is Roman Edmond, it looks also like, known as LongBottoms, the FanDuel. Okay, good. All right, Roman, what's up, brother?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How about you, Ben?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak with you and meet you, and I really think that our members will really get a lot out of this, and they'd love to hear from you. So
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
No problem, brother. So the first thing I'd like to do is just show everybody the Winning at Fantasy Football book that Roman wrote. And so this is based on the FanDuel Championship from last year. So what he did is he went through and analyzed his lineup, his process, his construction, and his game theory. Roman, would you like to talk for a sec about this?
Sure.
All right.
First of all, I'd like to say, no worries. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for giving this platform for me to say hi to the DFS community and provide a little bit guidance and wisdom to folks that are interested in improving their overall skill set. The reason for me creating this book is I wanted to kind of give back and provide guidance and information to some of the folks that are grinding out there and that want to be a little bit more better or have a better lineup. And I think for the last 8 or 9 months, it's been so long since I've won, it seems that way, since December, but I would have various conversations and communications with or different entities, and everyone wanted to get a little snapshot of my thinking on creating that optimal lineup. And so I said, you know what may make sense is for me to create this book, provide some guidance behind some of the decisions that I made and decisions that I didn't make, and then also provide some key principles and philosophies that I follow across the board in my everyday life.
Nice. And so I really think that everybody should get this book if you want to learn about how he constructed his $3 million winning lineup. And so real quick, Roman, let's just get into a little bit of your past. And before we go into that, guys, if you want to mute the chat, it seems like it's pretty annoying. You can click the button next to where you would type a message, and I just put a picture in the chat for you guys. So you can actually click where it says mute sound, and so you won't have that little dinging coming up every time someone says something. So I think that's pretty important because it sounded annoying as shit. So I'm sure people don't want to be listening to that all the time. But all right, Roman. So if you can just give me a little breakdown of your past when it comes to your life before DFS, whether it's working, schooling. I know you were big into season long, so let's just go start. Give me a little bit of information about how you started in DFS and where you came from before that.
So just how I started in DFS, is that what you're referring to? Kind of a history on that?
Yeah. So how did you translate whatever you did for work before this? So what kind of career were you involved in or anticipating being in, and how did that lead you into eventually being a DFS player?
Yeah, sure. So what I would say initially is I'm probably a little bit older than most DFS players currently today. I'm in my mid-40s. So I've been around the block for quite some time. And in respect to work-related, my background deals more so with project management. And then more recently, in the last maybe 7-8 years, it was IT security, which is a growing industry, and there's lots of opportunities there. So for me, some of these things that I've done in those past experiences were working with various groups and creating a team, understanding the big pictures on how to accomplish and launch certain initiatives, and then find out and create a plan of action in order to make those things happen. You know, for me, I would say that has been helpful as I had a goal of being, you know, the champion or doing well in these tournaments, that I've created a specific plan, short, medium, long-term goals. And so I think some of the things that I've done in the past help best translate my success these days. What I would say is around the year 2011, I was working at a media company here in Virginia where I've lived for the last couple of years. And I had a friend of mine that worked there that had a buddy that dropped out of their fantasy football league. And so at the last second, he asked me, did I know anything about sports? And I said, sure. And then he invited me to his fantasy league. And I think there was about 12 or 14 individuals that were part of that league. And it was a league that he's been doing for the last, I would say 6, 7 years prior to that, with his family and some of his close friends. So I ended up driving to his house in Delaware. They had like a big kickoff party, which it seems like that's, to me, one of the better things of doing it for season long, where you had that camaraderie of going there and drinking and eating, hot dogs.
I'm actually hosting my league this Sunday at my house. We always do a live draft every year. And what we do is, in order to figure out like the draft, the order of the draft, what we do is we each get assigned a Little League World Series region. So how it works is, like I'm Texas this year, so I need my team to score the most runs in the tournament. Whoever scores the most runs in the tournament, their team for our draft gets the first draft, and if your team does the worst, of course you get the last place draft. So it's really fun. The whole week we're all kind of rooting for our own Little League World Series teams to figure out who's gonna get the picks in the draft.
That's actually fun. Yeah, so I definitely think that that actually lifts camaraderie. Is especially in the beginning of the season, and that's when you can kind of talk a lot of smack. And when I went there the first year, it was just a great joy of going through the process of getting your creating your team, and then throughout the year massaging him based on injuries and things of that nature in order to win week after week. For me, the first year went well, and I ended up winning the whole thing, and that was good. I was like, hey, I'm a winner, because throughout the whole time you had people going to chat, the chat room or whatever, in respect to our league, because I think we used Yahoo at the time, and saying, yeah, they're gonna kill you when they play you, and then I ended up winning, so that was cool. And then the second year I had to, try to preserve my title and the mantle of being the best, and I did. And then the third year I did as well, and then the fourth year I did. And then the fifth year, I didn't get an invite to their fantasy league. The reason why I realized that, it was funny, because the reason why I realized that is that my brother was friends with them, and he got an invite to the league. And so he ended up playing, and I didn't. And I was like, wow, is that how we're going to do this? And based on that kind of gave me the push to look on the internet for just different things, and I ran into FanDuel.
Was it so it was, I like to think internet, and it wasn't one of those one of their 10,000 advertisements on TV?
No, this was, I think, before that time frame. So we're looking at circa 2013 or so. Okay. And there was still a little bit of fledgling company trying to get up there, and not like 2015 with the inundation of all those online and TV campaigns.
So going into your third NFL or fourth NFL season?
Third.
Okay, cool. So with that, let's transition into I heard you mention goals, short, medium, and long-term goals. So do you think that starting off this season having a specific goal is the way to go in DFS, or do you recommend more of the short term, just trying to do it week by week?
I would say creating a goal in anything in life is very important. I think that if you can't create goals, you can't figure out and measure your success or failures. And then at that point, you'd be thinking about what you've done recently. So if your goal, for example, initially was that you had a bankroll and you would want to just use that specific bankroll throughout the season, you would be able to create a plan that would ensure that your bankroll management strategy would be consistent and helpful for that, for example. So if you started with a bankroll of $400 and you had that in your mind, you know that every week at most you would be able to invest whatever, 10% or whatever the case may be. If you don't have that, there may be some weeks that you think you're hot, or you get an extra pick or a strong pick from someone, and then you might push a little stronger than you should. But having that goal, that particular idea to follow, would be very helpful in that respect, in that regards. Also for me is sometimes it's not just about the money, it's about more intangible stuff. So if in fact, your thought process was that by this year I am going to play in X amount of games, you would be able to then angle and create a strategy in order to accomplish that. What I do find out from a lot of new DFS players, including some of my friends that started when I did, was they would, let's say, load up with a certain amount of money, and then they would press hard. And by week 3, they'd probably blown all their money because they had 3, let's say, quote unquote, bad weeks.
Right.
And then they'll be frustrated and they'll say, this is nothing, this is like a scam, or, only the real good players win, or whatever the case may be, and never play again. And so one of the things I really want to urge new people is come up with some plan, because it may be the week after you decide to stop DFS would have been the week that things turn and, blaze forward for you. So that would be my suggestion for new people.
Okay, so one of the things is be consistent with your process and how much you're playing, because though if you can go 2 weeks in a row without doing much, but that third week, if you're still playing the same amount and doing the same thing, that could be the week that pops. So you can have these short-term goals of success, of course, and trying to win week by week, but like Roman said, I think it's more you have to be able to embrace the grind and the longevity of it, because if you destroy your bankroll within 2 weeks, then it becomes less about thriving and more about surviving. So
Perfect. I agree with you. And just to interject, Ben, for me, a classic example was when I discussed this in my book, where I did win 4 times in a row in season-long fantasy football, and I was a champion, and they kicked me out. But once I joined FanDuel, I thought I was king, king of the hill type deal. And
right.
I came in blazing, and I got my butt handed to me week after week after week after week. So my first season in DFS football was not so good. I was a loser by definition. I think I won 1 week out of all whatever 18 weeks that there were. And thank goodness I did have, first of all, that bankroll management strategy in mind. And then I also, because of, things that I've done, I've had money that I would be able to invest a little bit more. But if I didn't have those 2 combinations, you probably wouldn't be speaking to me today.
Right. And I think that's very important just in general, because a lot of people come into this thinking, well, I know NFL. I watch a lot of NFL. I could beat all these guys. And it's not just about that. We know it's not just about the knowledge of the game, but also strategy of game theory, deciding who to play at what price and in what matchups. And there's a lot that go into it. So to segue that, I'd like to talk about your little championship run last year.
Sure.
So before we show the winning lineup and the $3 million FanDuel championship takedown, we were speaking the other day, and you told me about how you actually got to the live finals, and I think that's a very interesting story. also considering we were both at the Roto Grinders conference and we both sat in on Cheese is Good tournament and qualifier talk, and we didn't even realize we were sitting in the same room together. So take me on a little virtual journey of when you left that Roto Grinders conference, how you saw the game differently and how you inevitably got to the championship.
Sure thing. Before I do talk about that, one thing I wanted to do was provide a little bit more granularity, if I can, between my time in building my overall game in DFS football and that DFS conference last, I think, October 2015. So that first season I didn't do so well in football, and a couple months later, baseball season started. In the past, I've done, I've played baseball and I know the rules and I watch television and the games, and so I thought I'd take a shot at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do a lot of reading, books, articles. They have various sites out there, Roto Grinders, and other ones, outfits, and I was able to learn from people that were more successful than me. Started creating my own composition paper with a whole bunch of notes, and started building strategies and things, little nuggets, and where there's specific opportunities to bang on. And in the baseball season, I won like 2 or 3 like major significant tournaments. Low 5-digit winnings, and I was like, wow, this is good. And then football season rolled around, and I did not win any major tournaments or anything like that. However, it was a profitable year. I did really well. And then the following summer, baseball season came, and I did well, or whatever the case may be. And what I was doing was prepping myself. In my mind, 2016 was going to be the year where I was going to really break out. That was kind of my goal. That's why I had everything set up. So when there was an opportunity to have to attend the DFS conference in the fall of 2015, there was no way I was not going to make it. Actually, at the time I was working, I called in sick for that time frame. I was late to picking up a flight, so I decided to drive there. So I drove to New York City from DC, which is not a big issue, like 4.5 hours or what have you. Ended up seeing some families and friends, but I did participate in a DFS conference, and that was very awesome because it gave you an opportunity to kind of rub shoulders with fellow colleagues, fellow people that love DFS. And then more importantly, there was plenty of opportunities formally of having classes and listening to DFS great winning individuals. And then informally, there was many sessions, many lunch dates, many after-hour events where you would be able to dig deep and just bombard individuals with questions.
Right.
And what I would say is the DFS community is fantastic. Everyone is great. Everyone's willing to share. As long as you have the enthusiasm of wanting to learn more, from what I've noticed, all the individuals are open enough to share and will talk to you for days.
I agree.
That was one thing I noticed, One thing was also helpful was I realized that these people were just as human as me. So they're not no secret cyborgs out there that play DFS or anything like that. They're just regular Joe Schmoes that happen to love DFS, happen to spend dedicated time in crafting, a strategy and looking at this as being serious, and they have blossomed and been successful more than you. I think that was very helpful for me, understanding that these people are just human too. So after that event, I was on cloud 9, very high on what I could bring to the table. Came home, told my wife how I had a great event, and segueing back to the DFS conference, one of the classes or courses that was being conducted, like you mentioned, was Cheese is Good, and it dealt with qualifiers and how to handle that. And one of the things I got out of that was that for all qualifiers, but actually wait for you really are high on a lineup, number one. And then number two, maybe look at a time to jump in when there is going to be overlay.
Right.
Qualifier.
I think overlay is definitely underlooked when it comes to tournaments and the average player of the DFS industry.
Exactly. So for me, I think it was when I got back on Saturday. Sunday, there was like basketball, I believe, still. And then there was a tournament, a qualifier, $50 entry. And if you won, if you won it, I think maybe beat 100 people, or maybe it's less than 100 people. I think it might have been 50 people. You would win a $1,000 ticket that you then would be able to compete with other 100 people in order to make it to the big show. So I actually created a roster, and and I never usually do qualifiers, but I remembered that conversation that we had in front of Cheese is Good, and there was some overlay. I think there was like 20 people short of being full, and so I actually created a winning lineup, and I beat everyone by like 30 points, and in basketball, that's a lot. So I was very happy to do that. And then the next week there was that $1,000 ticket I was able to play in an event that dealt with NFL, and that was the week where Marshawn Lynch was hurt and didn't play, and Thomas Rolls went off. I think he almost ran for 200 yards and a couple touchdowns.
You had Rolls that week?
I did.
Nice.
And it was kind of those mindsets too, like, of a GPP, and realizing and digging more deep into what that injury meant. And so, like, this is a classic example. We all knew that Marshawn Lynch was iffy about that game, so everybody decided not to even take a chance. When I did more further research and dig more deeper, I really understood that Marshawn Lynch had an abdomen issue. And if he had an abdomen issue and he's a runner, from my perspective, that is not something that you're going to be able to cope with throughout the whole game.
Right.
So my mindset was, I can get a second string running back that will play probably half the game, because it was against a team that was inferior. I don't recall the team right now, but I was thinking that if Marshawn Lynch plays, he'll play the first half, and Seattle will take a huge lead. They'll definitely sit him down because he's a valuable asset, and they'll have Thomas Rowe play, the second half, and that's lots of volume. Wow. If in fact he doesn't play at all, I'm really going to do well. And then
that's true.
Yeah. So like 5 minutes before lock, they identified and stated that Marshawn was not going to play, and Thomas Rolls will. And that's like a 4 o'clock game. So I'm like, whoa, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So everyone who was on FanDuel was already locked in.
They were. And I was already in first place, or tied for first before that. And then with Thomas Rolls, I was just hoping that he would do well.
I'm sure he was alone too, right?
I think, well, within my tournament, I was the only one that owned him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was fantastic. I ended up winning that. And you had to do the sweat, and, we always talk about the sweat. There was an 8 o'clock game that day, as well as a Monday night sweat.
Oh, man.
So I did have a significant lead. So I think there was a couple of wide receivers that would have to score like 4 touchdowns and 180 yards. So, safe to say, it seemed like I was going to go to the championship.
Man, that's not a sweat. Come on, that's chill. That's just counting your money.
Yeah, fair enough. But it was one of those things where, I saw the finish line, being able to participate in a championship with some great players, and possibly things may not go, things crazy. I've seen crazier things happen. I've lost tournaments with crazier things as well. And so
you won that, and then that took you to $1,000 ticket, right? And that's another qualifier. That's not the actual main live final. That took you to another tier of qualifiers, right?
Well, the first one took me to that $1,000 ticket, and that $1,000 ticket with Thomas Rolls in the lineup took me to the championship, because I had to beat 120 other people that had a $1,000 ticket. So
Oh, okay.
essentially,
Rawls
it was
was in the $1,000 tournament.
yeah, so it's like $120,000 pulled into for that one seat to go to the championship in San Diego.
Right, and before we move on, you're getting some David Ortiz comparisons and possibly a little bit of Neo with the glasses. Maybe Neo's.
Never heard of Neo as a comparison. My brother, people call Neo. However, David Ortiz, yes. When I go to Atlantic City or Vegas, that's the first thing people say is Big Papi. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah.
All right, so now you're in the live finals, and we have here. Let me show the lineup that you actually won with. So for everyone interested, right here we have Roman's lineup. There was 120 people in there, and he had Blake Bortles at 14% with 25 points. Todd Gurley at 2% owned with 27 points. Eddie Lacy at 12% owned with 21 points. AJ Green 19% owned at 22. Alan Hearns 15% owned at 18. Alshon Jeffrey with 27% owned, 19 points. Delaney 18%, 10 points. Your boy Mason Crosby at 4% with 4 points.
Oh man.
And the Kansas City Chiefs with a 50% ownership, which is very high for something like this at 14 points. And so to just extend that with the lineup is you wrote the book here. If anybody ever had a question on the lineup, this is where to find that information.
That is
Winning
correct.
fantasy football. And now we're going to be selling this on our site. There will be a way for you guys to access it and purchase it. And I think you'll really get a lot out of it. So would you like to just maybe break down some of your game theory plays, how you approached the setting of this lineup? Because you told me, and it's such a fascinating story, especially the kicker spot, and I know you like talking about that. So
Sure.
if you can, just give us a little perspective on how you approached a 120-man contest, knowing there were pros there, knowing certain players might be higher owned than others. So if you can just do a little breakdown for us.
Sure. So you mentioned there was a 120-man competition.
Oh wait, sorry. Before you start, if you can, just go into the DRS live page and just mute the sound of the chat so it doesn't pop up on your side. Next to where you would type a message, just click that button and then you could click mute sound.
Yeah, I thought I did that, so I didn't. And bingo bango. I think we're off and running now.
All right, brother. So take us on a journey.
Sure. One of the things that you mentioned was it was a 120-man competition, right? But sort of incorrect, because what you notice is there was about 10 or 12 players that had multiple entries.
Okay, so 120 entries, right?
Yeah, and the reason why I harp on that, I think in my opinion, it's a significant advantage to have the opportunity to create multiple lineups for a tournament. And so, you know, someone that has one lineup like myself and some of the other folks, I think that did well, it says a lot. It says a lot when you have one bullet and someone else has 3 or 4, and they can come up with 3 different strategies. So
I agree.
that was first and foremost that I noticed when I was thinking about creating my lineup there. So that's number one. Now, when I finally did qualify, you know, and I noticed this was a $12 million tournament, and it was actually $3 million to the champion, and 1.5 to second, and 1 million to third. Obviously, it was going to be a significant top-heavy tournament, where I think a third of the folks that came in, you know, the bottom third would get about 20K or something that nature. I knew it was imperative to create a lineup that had a lot of variance as well as that had a lot of potential. So, you know, GPP extraordinaire, I was going down with, you know, guns blazing and with glory behind that.
So were you looking for any kind of like floor, like cash consistency, or you were looking for the boom bust?
I was looking for the boom bust for the most part in at least 3 or 4 positions. So, one of my mindset was I did need a floor and stability for certain positions, but then certain other positions where I did see there was opportunity for someone to really go off, then I took that chance and put the metal to the pedal. So with that said, when you mentioned, for example, the Kansas City defense, from my perspective, there was going to be zero chance that I was going to choose another defense besides the KC defense.
So that was a lock for you.
That
You
was a lock.
went
And
lock right away.
yeah, and in my opinion, I thought you did mention it was 50% owned. In my opinion, I thought it was too under owned. To be honest with you, I thought it shouldn't have been
You
closer.
thought everyone was going to have it.
Yeah, or I expect, and even in retrospect, I think everyone should have had KC.
Right, so because we had the Chargers, no Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon hadn't scored a touchdown all year. KC was on a roll at that point, so it was just a lock for you.
It was a lock. I mean, and you recall, KC also played San Diego at San Diego like 2 or 3 weeks before, and Phillip Rivers was running like Usain Bolt the whole game. So to me it was like nada.
And he wasn't smiling.
No offense. So you knew you were going to have a solid point output for your defense, and you could roll with that. I think they had 5 sacks that day. They allowed San Diego a meager 3 points.
Yep.
So that worked in line exactly with what I forecast. Outside of that, one of the things that I decided to do, or one of the things that I recognized for last season, which probably will play this season as well, was that your top offensive wideouts and / receivers, including tight ends, produced positive points more so on a consistent basis and high outputs. And I thought that was very important.
On FanDuel, where it's half PPR, it's not even full.
It's not even full. So if you look for specific players that really are high end on the wide receiver or tight end position, they always provided quality points for you. So right off the bat, I did things a little differently, where those were the 4 spots that I created a lineup with. I started off with A.J. Green, and then I went and got Alshon Jeffrey, and then when I went back and forth to decide my wide receiver, I picked Allen Hurns, and then coupled him with Blake Bortles. So right off the bat, I had those 3 positions ready, locked down. After that, my thought process was, again, we talked about offensive receivers. I needed a top-end tight end. And for me, I went with Delanie Walker. I thought he was Mariota's #1 receiver. And if you look at it now, retrospect, Delanie Walker had the #1 targets for tight end throughout the season last year. And he ranked number 14 out of all receivers in targets, out of all, 14. So I thought his price was very attractive, and you might as well go with that.
Yeah, so I actually built NFL spreadsheets that we're going to be putting out for season long, and no one's ever seen them yet. So this is the first actual preview of it. And exactly what you said right here. We have Delanie, the #1 tight end with 133 total targets, 8.9 average per week. And he is the number 14 in all of the league. So the fact that you had that off the top of your head is very impressive.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. This thing is helpful. If you can, if you can ensure that everyone knows where to get something like that for this year, I think it would be helpful for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. This is what we're going to be putting out. I'll preview this a little bit more as we go along, and I'll show you guys what we're working with here. But in terms of targets, 100%. He was the #1 tight end, and he would have been the number 14 overall receiver in terms of total targets.
Wow. And I think that's the number I said, too.
Yeah, that's what you literally said, number 14. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because I was looking at him like, damn, he just nailed that.
Wow. Wow.
Also, what I did here is I broke down the targets from week 1 through 8, the first half and the second half, and I created something that we call late push. And so this is showing who actually received more targets towards the second half of the season, and then it fell off who lost targets as it went along. And so we saw that he averaged 6 targets per game for the first half of the season and around 10 for the second half. So coming into this year, he's also going to be a very viable option for that offense. So
That's correct.
So we
That's
have
awesome stuff.
We have Delaney Walker, as we have Kansas City D locked in. We have Delaney Walker, and it's interesting that you would choose to go him, knowing that the Jets were such a good defense. Can you maybe shed some light on why you would pick him as your floor tight end?
Sure. I mean, it goes back to targets, and in any sports, when you have targets, volume, what have you, it's always a good thing. Again, I think the week before, Mariota had a good game. I think he ran for like 1 billion yards. I think that was the week before. Like I think
I was going to have like the 70-yard run or whatever.
Yeah. So you could tell possibly the offensive line wasn't as cooperative as it should be. And then with that said, Delaney, like the other wide receivers on that team, Beckham, I think Dorian Beckham, and Kendall Wright, all those, they're not good. So even if, and it almost backfired a little bit where the Jets defense was that great, where it took towards the end for Walker to get that value for me.
Was there a garbage time touchdown?
No, it wasn't garbage time. It was like third quarter. But I think at that time the game was already not in question. Where if it was more of a competitive game, I really, really would have made out. And
it
again,
would have been a lot better for you. He would have
been a lot better. But again, I mean, one of the things I look at when it comes to teams, and I think sometimes people look at the Vegas lines, and we can always talk about that later, but on a specific team, someone has to produce. It's just that simple. And now you want to realize now, is this person a major cog on that offense? If so, then you may want to look in rostering him. If he's not necessarily, then you can throw away that team in general. But in general, every team has their go-to guy. So you really should consider that.
And you're trying to figure that out for that week. Who will be the guy for this offense this week?
That's correct. I mean, the Jets were great, but I did think that Delaney Walker wouldn't be shut out. He'd have 5 reception, 60 yards. That's a poor game by Delaney Walker's standards, but that still would be satisfactory versus some of the tight ends I was thinking some of the other people would have, with a high upside as well.
Okay. And then, so we have our defense locked in. Do you normally lock in your defense first, or is that just something that was specific to this week?
I don't necessarily lock in my defense first, but what I will tell you is I'm not like most DFS people that lock in my defense last.
Okay.
What I've noticed is a lot of folks create that optimal lineup, and then they say what defense are left.
Right, who's left?
And then they decide on those 2 or 3. If you even look, like, for example, my winning, the actual championship, I'm not going to, like, specifically point out individuals, but if you look at certain rosters, you'll notice that certain people created a great roster, and they even have running backs, for example, and this, I'm going to give just an arbitrary or just some random example, because I think Cincinnati and Pittsburgh played together. But let's say they would have the Pittsburgh running back as their go guy, D'Angelo Williams, and they would have Cincinnati defense. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense at all. If the Pittsburgh guy goes off, Cincinnati's.
They're just kind of, they're not only limiting their upside, but
they're limiting your upside. And so, like, it was, like, really interesting how people did it. And then that kind of helped substantiate and confirm my thoughts that a lot of people just create that optimal lineup minus the defense, and whatever's left, they throw in the defense. And I would say, I know people say it's, maybe like defense and kickers are kind of random, but at the end of the day, the top flight type end defenses are not random. They're consistent. And that's why I decided to pick KC and then call it a day. Let's not play games, because there was a time where I actually considered picking Philadelphia Eagles for that tournament, and that would have been a grave error.
I actually didn't even realize this, and I have this showing for everybody right now. But not only did you win, you won by 13 points.
Quite
You
significant, yeah.
crushed it. You
Yeah,
crushed them.
yeah. So I was fortunate where if I would have possibly made an error or two more, I might have still had a chance of squeaking it out.
Right. Okay. So we have our defense. We had the tight end, and then you went Blake Bortles to Allen Hurns stack, and I know Allen Robinson was the more popular receiver at the time. How come you chose to go with Hurns over Robinson?
I could say Alan Hearns is my brother-in-law, but that would be just a story. But the reason why I did that was a couple of reasons. Like you just said, Allen Robinson was going bonkers the last 3-4 games, and I knew everyone's going to be on him because he's a great athlete. He has high upside. One of the things that people failed to realize was that Allen Hurns is a beast. He was on the team before Robinson came, and he was balling. Also, during that time frame, he also was out because he had a concussion. So I think he was out like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, maybe 3 weeks. And that allowed Allen Robinson to even have more touches. This was his first week back. And if I recall, I think that Allen Hurns had maybe the most consecutive, 100 yards in whatever the case may be. But I knew there was definitely some good synergy between those two.
Mm-hmm.
And I also thought that it is possible that the Indianapolis Colts were going to game plan to stopping Robinson. And if that's the case, Allen Hurns is going to be wide open, and he's going to have a big catch, at least one big catch. And he did. He caught an 80-yard touchdown at the start of the third quarter, and that really helped propel me up the leadership board.
That's pretty incredible, and the fact that you all right. So talking about shutting down Allen Robinson, Vontae Davis is one of the better cornerbacks in the league, and he basically shadows whoever is the number one for the most part. So I assume that if you're going to try and stop Allen Robinson, you're going to have Vontae Davis, but you'll probably also have some over-the-top help as well if he's going man coverage. So taking that extra man and devoting it to him, and then you have someone who is as popular with Bortles as Allen Hurns was. I think that was a great game theory play, and I don't even know if I would consider it contrarian. I just think it's a great play. I think
Thanks.
contrarian would be going with a different offense in general because, I mean, people were on this offense for the most part, but the fact that you went Hurns over Robinson, it was well thought out. It wasn't just, let me just play this guy because I think he'll be lower owned, but there was more to it than just the ownership.
Absolutely. One of the things, too, that you look at is that, if I recall, Allen Hurns cost me 6.6, right? $6,600.
Mm-hmm.
Allen Robinson was over 8K, if I recall.
Yep.
So that's $1,500 difference. And so, in order for Allen Robinson to pay off, you knew he had to score a touchdown and close to 100 yards.
Yep.
For Allen Hurns, he gets 4 or 5 catches for 70 yards, and he doesn't hit a touchdown. I'm not super happy, but he did his job for $6,600.
Agreed.
That was a thing also in my mind. So that's where the high upside comes into play as well, where he definitely should hit and make value, but he does have a high upside. And again, you're right. I mean, for me, I thought still Blake Bortles was still under-owned. What was he owned, like 14, 15%?
Yeah, I thought he would have been more owned than that as well.
So that team likes to throw, so I think even the tight end, if you would have went with the tight end, to me, it would have been a justifiable move. So, again, like you said, it wasn't a super contrarian. And if you kind of dig deeper and looked and analyzed at such, you wouldn't say that, wow, LongBottoms made, the most creative decision on rostering him.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was my point, that it was just a good play in general. Like, it wasn't a crazy play. It wasn't a huge contrarian play. It was a good play. And I think that's what may have been underestimated. And so we're doing write-ups for every team season coming up. And the breakdown that I did on the Jaguars, we had Blake Bortles was a top 10 QB in completions, attempts, and yards, and he was tied in number 2 in the whole league for pass touchdowns. So for someone who throws the ball a lot and scores a lot of touchdowns, I think he was underowned, and people really didn't value him enough in the spot that you did. And he ended up with 3 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown that day.
Absolutely. I remember that day. I watched that game pretty extensively. A couple of things what I'll say is I'm not as high on Blake Bortles this year as opposed to last year for multiple reasons. And we can go into this year if you like, and talk about other, not only my past. But for the Jaguars this year, their defense is leaps and bounds better than last year. They picked up a couple of folks that were out the whole season. They had nice draft picks. Their secondary is going to be unstoppable. I think they're going to be a far better team. Then they ended up picking up running back Chris Ivory.
Yep.
So their idea is that they're going to start running the ball more. I know when they're in the red zone, since they have so many gifted receivers, they were more prone to throw the ball. But I think now they're going to be in closer games, and so they're going to take it closer to the vest. So I'm not as high on Blake Bortles as I would, in previous years.
Right. Yeah, it seems like they're also a little bit more focused on running, having Ivory there, and he'll be their touchdown guy. I don't think, once they get into the red zone, I think he'll be the guy and not Yeldon.
Yep. And, what I would say, too, is I think when I was doing some other fantasy contest the week before, I picked T.J. Yeldon because I thought he was in a good spot, and I watched the game, and I noticed that there were several opportunities where you would assume that they should run the ball, and they passed the ball. So my mindset started to work thinking that the Jaguars are a young team that still are trying to fill themselves and get and create an identity. Agreed. Also, they're just about like fun and gun. Let's just score. Let's have some fun. That type of deal. They're not disciplined. So I used it as being not disciplined in a good way. You mentioned that Blake Bortles had a rushing touchdown. The way that he got it didn't even make sense, to be honest with you. It was like the fourth quarter. I think the Jaguars were up by like 20-something points with 5 minutes left. And on 4th down and 1, instead of going for a field goal or giving it to your running back, he runs it in. He does a quarterback sneaks and runs it in for a touchdown.
It's crazy that he did that.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot. Rushing touchdowns count for more.
It does. An extra 2 points. So you got to not only catch up and look at the stats, you also have to get into the mind of the team. What's the team's philosophy? What's the coach's philosophy? That makes a huge difference when you have to separate Blake Bortles from, another quarterback. It really comes into play. And all these elements and all these little nuggets and items are processing in my mind. And there's the pluses and minuses. And, at the end of the day, with all what I just told you, I was quite confident in going with him. Because, another quarterback that I was very interested in, which it was going to be either him or Blake Bortles, was Fitzpatrick of the Jets. I was high on him that day as well, And then some of the issues or positive things that I've mentioned to you pushed me to Bortles. Fitzpatrick had a pretty decent day as well. So,
if you decided to go Fitzpatrick, do you think you would have gotten away from Allen Hurns and maybe tried to stack Decker?
No, I would have had Marshall.
Oh, okay. You would have been able to afford that there? Because you would have probably had to change AJ.
AJ wasn't going anywhere. So, AJ wasn't going anywhere. Who knows what I would have done? I know AJ wasn't going to go anywhere, and Hurns would. I don't think I would have chosen Hurns, to be honest with you.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
That's why I asked Decker, not Marshall, just because of
Yeah,
price.
I would have went with Marshall if I was doing Fitzpatrick, and he scored a touchdown as well with Fitzpatrick. But I was high on Marshall at the time as well because I was going to choose him instead of Alshon Jeffrey. And we going
Oh,
back
okay.
and
That would
forth.
have made okay. Yeah, that would have made sense.
Yeah,
All right, and I want to move on to your AJ pick because I think it's very interesting how you got there. But right before that, I just want to go over another tidbit of stats just from the write up. Last year, Allen Robinson actually led the league in 20-plus yard plays. He had 31, and then the next best was Antonio Brown with 25. And 12 of Allen Robinson's 14 touchdowns came in the red zone with 14 catches on 21 targets. So he led the league in big 20-yard plays, but he didn't have a lot of touchdowns there. He had all of his touchdowns in the red zone. And he and Allen Hurns both averaged 16 to 17 yards per catch. So I think it's very interesting that you can have two big play guys, but score most of the touchdowns when you get into the red zone. So I think that's very volatile.
that's interesting. And you said they both basically had the same yards per catch.
Yeah.
You
Let's
said
see. It
17 or
was
so?
Allen Robinson had 17 yards per catch, and Allen Hurns had 16 yards per catch on 17 targets per game. So
Yeah,
16 yards per catch on 7 targets per game. That's good for me, man, especially at that price
at
and
that price.
knowing they like to throw the ball a lot in the red zone and not run it. I really wanted to just mention that because the Allen Hurns pick was just a really good pick.
Thank you. I mean, when you look at it as well, you assume that the Jaguars were going to score touchdowns, at least 3, 4 touchdowns. If that's the case, it's very conceivable that Robinson scores a touchdown and Hearns scores a touchdown.
Right.
If that is the case, Hearns is going to be outperforming Robinson 10 out of 10 times, right? I mean, unless Robinson scores 2 touchdowns.
Right.
You
In
know,
terms of
basically
value,
going to be the same. Based on the price that you have to pay for Robinson. So those are the things that you have to take in consideration as well.
I agree. So tell me about how you ended up on AJ Green because I think it's very interesting. The game that you mentioned to me.
Oh, the game. Okay.
The game.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say I have a brother, younger brother, much younger brother that is into football as well, and he knew what I did, and we always have conversations. And one of the exercises that I think he was the one that actually suggested it's like name that wide receiver. Like I mentioned before, you have these wide receivers that are studs, and if you look at some of the game, the game summaries at the end of various weeks, you have wide receivers that have huge games. And the key was, can we find wide receivers that have huge, consistent games and don't have these duds? The you know, there's Mike Evans. Like this guy can have great games, and then you don't see him. It's almost like he was sitting next to you on the couch on some days. He's
Yep.
healthy, but he's just not doing anything. We did was we played the game where, for example, I would have a whole listing of the game logs of all wide receivers, and I would go from week 1 up to I guess at that point week 13. It was 3 points, 24 points, 7 points, and I'll go through all the various fantasy points that they produced. Would listen and say, that seems like a consistent good player, and then I would then spill out and say that person's name. And then you'd be sometimes shocked and surprised, saying, wow, I never knew this guy was as consistent.
Right.
Or I never knew this guy really had duds. Exercise. And, one of the key guys that we got high numbers and was very consistent was AJ Green, the best out of all folks. And even if, you look at fantasy points per, game versus wide receivers, I'm not too sure I don't think he's number one. Julio Jones, he's a beast. He's had some ridiculous games, but Julio Jones has had some because of Matt Ryan, but nevertheless, he has some terrible games. Julio's game logs, you had some great numbers, but then you also had some, and that's why I was able to disqualify certain people on the radar.
Yeah, so we have AJ Green. He averaged 11 fantasy points per game last year, and a 65% catch rate. He was almost 1,300 yards and ended up with 10 touchdowns. That's a pretty successful year, especially considering he doesn't exactly have an elite quarterback.
No. And one of the things again I want to say is, you said I think he averaged 11 fantasy points a game. Mm-hmm. That's all fine and dandy, but then you have to go, in my mind, dig deeper and go into the videotape, meaning you have to go into the actual game logs, because you can average 11 fantasy points a game when you have 2 zeros and you get, 33 points?
Right.
On the third game? And that's 11 points a game, and you're like, wow, this guy's great. But I wouldn't be comfortable with a player that, rostered 3 zeros in 2 games and 33 in the next. So again, just by looking at what he averages doesn't tell the whole picture.
I agree. I harp on that a lot, that the best form of research is game film.
Yeah, and I think in general, like in life as well, is like you have to unpeel the onion. If somebody says something to you, or if you hear or read something, you need to kind of peel back the onion and digest that a little further. Observation, and say, you know what, that is correct, or this is correct with this caveat. Mm-hmm. So that, right. I just want to do that and share that.
I agree. We actually say that, because we put out MLB sheets, and it's all numbers, all data. And sometimes, you have to use the data, but understand why it's being presented that way. And in baseball, you have to pay attention to the parks and the pitcher and all these different things, but you still need to know some concept of how the game's played, and, who plays well in what positions. And it's not just, look at this and plug it in. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. And so let's go on to, so we did the game. We got AJ Green. We found consistency. He got 22 points. And then so our last kind of area, I guess, to touch on would be the running backs here. And looking at this now, that Todd Gurley, 2% owned and got 27 points. Now, I was amazed, right? So I was really amazed seeing 2% owned for Todd Gurley, who was basically one of the best running backs in all of the NFL last year. And I wasn't as amazed until I just realized now that he was $7,900 and Doug Martin was $8,100 more, and he was 38% owned. Doug Martin over Todd Gurley. And he ended up with a touchdown, but he only had 15 points compared to Todd Gurley's, 2 touchdowns and 27 points. So how come you decided to go with Gurley when it seems that the obvious favorite here for that price range was Doug Martin?
Sure. I did tell you that I started in roster. My strategy was to roster 3 wide receivers, tight end first, what have you. But the caveat was Todd Gurley was going to be in my lineup regardless. I told my wife and friends and everyone else that, like 2 weeks beforehand, that Todd Gurley is my man. I'm going to ride him, and he's going to either make me money or not. So that was a no-brainer to me. One of the things is that I was surprised it was 2.5% owned. I thought it would be a little bit more, but I wasn't. It's understandable why people didn't do that on a high-level perspective. Doug Martin, I think the previous week, ran for a whole bunch of yards, like 160 yards, whatever the case may be. And, even in the other weeks, he did well. So he had the hot hand, and he was the flavor of the month. So obviously there's this, the philosophy of recency bias. What have you done for me lately? Doug Martin has done a lot for folks. Todd Gurley didn't. So I was definitely not surprised that Doug Martin was owned almost 40% because of what have you done for me lately. One of the things that I realized, though, with Doug Martin was, I think it was that week or the week before, he ran for like 170 yards or maybe even 90 yards. didn't think he even scored a touchdown. It was clear to me that he's not a touchdown maker.
Right.
So he can have these phenomenal games and run for 180 yards, which gives you 18 points. And then you have like this, this other running back that runs only for 70 yards and has 2 touchdowns, and he exceeds the fantastic game of Doug Martin.
Right.
So that really ensured that I was not going to pick Doug Martin. I could tell you that. As far as Todd Gurley is, and the reason why I selected him, Todd Gurley is a beast. He's phenomenal. Obviously, in the beginning of the season, he was running, lights out, and everyone was rostering him. He did have a blip in the season where he didn't produce too many points. I think it was like 4 straight games. So I could see why people wouldn't want to, select him.
Right.
But if you dig deeper into the logs, you would notice things. Number one, a lot of people were saying that he hit the rookie wall. That's why. To me, I thought that was total hogwash.
Right.
Reason why? Todd Gurley didn't play the first game of the season at all. And I think he only had like 5 or 6 carries the second game of the season. So body-wise and hitting a rookie wall, that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
When you dig into the game logs even further, I think the 2 games prior, he played like the Cincinnati Bengals and the Arizona Cardinals or something like that. Some of the best defenses in the NFL at that time. What happened with game script? They came out, scored 14 points or so in the first quarter, and now the Rams are throwing the ball with a bad quarterback.
And they don't throw
backup quarterback. So Todd Gurley gets 50, 60 yards in both games combined, total rushing yards. That doesn't look good. But if you kind of dig deeper, you could see why that happened. Coming into that week, week 14, or whatever the case may be, they fired the offensive coordinator because they weren't happy with the production. Their starting quarterback was coming back from injury. They were playing at home. They were playing Detroit at home, and the line was St. Louis Ram -2, 42 points. So in my mind, that means that both teams, it's going to be a close game. Both teams should have 3 touchdowns. And if both teams has 3 touchdowns, that means the best players on their teams, especially if they're running backs, should be part of those scores. If that's the case, I'm going to pick Todd Gurley because the Rams are going to win, or should win, or keep it close. They should score 3 touchdowns, so Todd Gurley should have at least 2.
Right.
Let's pick Todd Gurley. And
I think that goes back to what you said about, there's one guy who's going to be the guy of that offense. And when looking at the Rams offense, he was the guy, unless you maybe tried to consider, a Tavon Austin. But it's obvious in your analysis that you would prefer the more consistent wide receivers. And Tavon doesn't fit even close to the term consistent.
That's correct. I mean, and to me, Todd Gurley, that was a no-brainer. You figured, in my mind, they fired the offensive coordinator. There's like 3 or 4 more games for the Rams. Jeff Fisher is on the hot seat, and he must produce wins. If he knows he's on the hot seat and he's a running coach, that's his nature, with Eddie George and all those other folks, he's going to give it to his workhorse. If he's going to get fired, I'm going to run Todd Gurley to the ground, and then feel good at getting fired, And so to me, it was like Todd Gurley's going to get the touches. He's going to be able to really perform and do well. And he ends up with 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he was clearly the best athlete on the turf then. Clearly the best athlete.
He's a stud, man. He really is. It's a big body, fast, strong. He kind of reminds me of Eddie George, honestly.
Absolutely. The 2 touchdowns, if people go look on YouTube, he had so much presence of the pylon. He was able to stretch out. One, he jumped over a couple people, stretched out for a touchdown, which was his first one where I was like, ooh, hallelujah. And then the second one, he ran to the corner. He did some jukes. And then after that, extended without fumbling the ball. and penetrated the end zone. And I needed that stuff. I needed that, to be honest with you.
And I'm sure
And
after that first diving touchdown, you were like, get up, don't stay down.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so that was, to me, out of all the plays and selections that I decided to go with, that was obviously the best one in my opinion. I had him for about a couple weeks beforehand, so I felt real comfortable with Todd freaking Gurley.
To finish it off, because I think this is one of the more interesting thought processes behind your selections. Eddie Lacy, Mason Crosby, running back, kicker stack. Tell me what was going through your mind.
Well, I mean, my kicker and the running back number 2 were kind of my last, selections that I needed in order to roster. I'm not going to have a lot of money for my running back, so I have to find the best running back that can have volumes and may be able to break out or what have you. There were some options. There was that running back in Cleveland and some other folks, maybe Frank Gore or whoever, that were in that 6,000, mid 6,000 range. As I was doing the research, I noticed that the Green Bay Packers were playing the Cowboys at home towards the end of the year, that they're going to try to ensure that they start that running mentality. I did some additional research and looked into like the Wisconsin Times and things of that nature. And what I discovered was that the coach started to say McCarthy started to say some good stuff about Lacy in practice. This guy, McCarthy, is one of those straight-laced people. He never likes complimenting people. And he said something to the point of, Eddie Lacy is tearing it up and is having a great week of practice. And I assumed the same on Sunday. Wow. So to me, I thought that was a glowing comment for your coach to say, especially McCarthy. So I was on Lacy with that. With the kicker, I decided to do some type of hedging where I'd pick my running back 2 and the team that my running back 2 represented as a kicker, and thinking that if in fact Eddie Lacy doesn't do well, which means that potentially Green Bay doesn't do well and score touchdowns, they probably would then end up kicking field goals. And if they kick field goals, I have Mason Crosby, and I get points for that. And, there is a rare occasion where it's a total blowout, so Eddie Lacy goes off, and I get points for Mason Crosby. And so that was my thinking. Instead of looking kind of on projections where I liked, the Pittsburgh kicker, the Cincinnati Bengals kickers for better. Mm-hmm. And like the Pittsburgh kicker, I think it was the Pittsburgh the Pittsburgh kicker I think scored like 18 points or some phenomenal points like that. And I had better kickers that I was projected better than
kicker was Chris Boswell and scored 18 at 4% owned.
Yeah, in an anticipated high scoring game. So that was pretty surprising.
The exact price as Crosby.
Yes, 4.7 or something. Yeah, exactly. Same exact price. I paid a good amount for Crosby, so it wasn't like I didn't necessarily have to spend more to get a different alternative. And so, when I look at my lineup, I look to that selection as possibly being the one that was wrong, the one that maybe I could have went a different way. Even right. Though,
would you use the word regret with a $3 million in hand and a first place? No, I would use the word regret.
I would not use the word regret because, like you said, I won by 13 points. Right. So I wouldn't use the word regret. But to me, it's maybe lessons learned. What I would want to do is now keep an eye moving forward on that strategy, maybe create dummy lineups and do that running back 2 and the team to see if this was a fluke and that what I'm saying makes sense.
Right.
I'll try that.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for, going through the lineup and not only just, talking about the lineup, but how you came to those decisions. And the fact that you remember literally like all the stats and everything, I think that's so impressive. And it really goes to show the research you did and how in tune to it that you were. So let's just transition real quick, and then we could finish off. So I wanted to mention a couple of things. One is Roman is I guess you would call a success coach. Is that the right term? Would you label yourself as a success coach, or how would you describe that?
I mean, I'll take that, but I really look at myself as like an accelerator. Some people call it personal development coach or trainer. You know, the whole idea there is you have individuals that have all the right intangible elements in order to be quite successful or move their lives forward. But the issue is there's certain pieces that they don't have yet in order to plug through, in order for them to get to the next stage. And you know, based on the years of work that I've done, as well as helping others in the past, I've decided to venture out to see if I can help individuals reach some of their dreams.
So we have Roman-Edmond.com. I'm showing it live for everybody right now. I definitely recommend checking out the website, and if you're into self-development or you know people who may be, definitely pass this along to them. Roman-Edmond.com, and that can be found on his Twitter at Niche Guy. So it's Roman Edmond at Niche Guy for Twitter. And so I have an announcement for everybody who's listening, and we will separate this into a video and post it up. But here at dailyrotosharks.com, we do what we can to try and help out the average player, make people better, and provide them tools that can gain success and knowledge and experience. And so one of the announcements that I'd like to say is we are bringing on Roman LongBottoms Niche Guy as a DRS contributor, and he'll be one of our spokesperson. He'll be one of the guys who, if you need help, you could post questions or anything, like when we do the podcasts. He'll put up an article every once in a while, but he's a DRS guy now. He's Daily Roto Sharks, and we really, really appreciate him wanting to join the team and bring on some new talent. And I can't promise he's going to be one of the everyday guys like us because he's very busy, but he is a member of the team now, and he'll be representing us, and I really appreciate all that you do, and our future relationship, and what we can put together for our members. So thank you very much, Roman. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ben, and I'm so excited to joining the team. And what you indicated is true, that what I'll be trying to do is provide as much nuggets as I can throughout the course of the season, where you guys may be able to leverage things and run and create those optimal lineups for success.
I appreciate that. And so I was made aware, I think yesterday, that you are going to be doing a slurv.com chat. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. That's fantastic, and I appreciate that you allow me to talk about that. So this Saturday, no, actually this Sunday, I'm going to have an opportunity to be on the chat. If you go to slurv, slurv.com, you'll be able to chat with me, ask me questions, and we'll be able to at least start a dialogue on a weekly basis prior to locking of your roster on, for example, what do you think, this week's matchups look like? If you have maybe are struggling with choosing between wide receivers or running backs, there's going to be an opportunity now on a weekly basis on Sundays at 11 a.m., if I recall.
Is that Eastern?
Eastern. So okay. You'll be able to work with me, and we'll go through stuff, and you'll be able to ask me questions in that regard. So I think that's going to be an advantage where, if I'll be able to identify maybe new information for that morning, I'll be able to relay that to you and provide you that, so you may be able to internalize that as you create your final rosters.
That's awesome, man. So that's slurv.com. And if you look here, they have some other experts as well. And in addition to LongBottoms, we have Daily Roto Sharks friend to the program, Evan Silva. We've done an interview with him already, and he's coming back to do another one before the season starts, hopefully. And then we also have Adam Levitan, who's one of the better DFS minds that we have out there. We have Ship My Money. He just won a couple of live finals. So looks like a great site. You can have expert chats with some of these better DFS players. So I definitely recommend checking out Roman on that site.
Yeah, they got some real beast over there. They got some DFS beast over there.
I see, man. I see, definitely. I wanted to bring that up. I think what they're doing is great, and the fact that you're giving yourself access.
But what you guys are doing is great as well, and that's why I decided to work with you guys as well. You're looking for a community and a platform where you can kind of make a difference and create that experience for the DFS players. And your site as well as Slurv sites are these up and coming communities that whatever, let's say, individuals like I can do to help, we will try.
Right, I appreciate it, and especially with DraftKings clamping down on lineup selling, which is actually big in this DFS industry, especially on Twitter. There's a lot of room opening up in terms of content providing, and I think that people are really going to start trying to look into researching more. People who are just buying lineups are actually going to want to learn and make their own lineups, and I think we'll be providing some great information for that. And so thank you very much, Roman. I really appreciate it. I'm going to end this by giving a quick little preview of the NFL sheets that we're putting out for the season long. And so I'm just going to scroll through this real quick so you guys can just get a good look. And we'll be putting them out very cheap for you guys. And I'll also be doing promotions with like the first 20 people to sign up get like 50% off or something like that. So we're figuring that out. But so what we have here is we have some average draft picks from different sites compiled here, so you get a good feel of which different sites are going where. I have ranks here by passing, rushing, and receiving, so you can see where each individual ranked in terms of the league. And then here I have a page for all of the targets from 2015 broken down by week, by first half, by second half. And then I also have the red zone targets, completions, and touchdowns. Then we have, this is one of my favorite parts, the ease of schedule. So you could see the defenses to pick on or to avoid here, and based by position, QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end. We also have the defensive points allowed per position. We have the QB ease of schedule by week, by first half, by second half, and total for the whole season, and that's by position. Then you can go into the QB stats and see all of the QBs from last year. Then you can go into passing leaders. So if you look at the ranks here, you have all of the ranks of all the players, and then if you go into the passing leaders, you can see the rank and the number based on what that rank was formed from. Same thing with running backs. We have a percentage of workload here, which I think is great. You could see like Latavius Murray had 72% of all of Oakland's rush attempts last year. Ivory had the second most with 70% of the Jets. So there's a lot going to be missing from the Jets that Forte can pick up. You have red zone attempts and all these different stuff. So you can go through these with everything. This is one of my favorites, yards at and after the catch. So we all know what after the catch is. You catch the ball and then, you run afterwards. But what we have at the catch is it shows you where, like, the yardage where someone caught the ball, not how many yards he gained afterwards. So I think that's something to utilize to decide, like, what type of player somebody is, if he's someone who catches and runs after, or if he's like more of a big play guy. So we have that for wide receivers and tight ends, and we also have yards after the catch allowed by teams. And you have tight ends, kickers. We have a whole thing for depth charts here where you can scroll down, check all the depth charts. You have all 2015 offensive information, rushing, passing, total, receiving, all that. You have the same for defense. We have a ton of offensive line information to help you out. So this is going to be basically an all-in-one reference guide for data that you need to look up quickly. So I think people will really enjoy that, and I wanted to end on that and give people a quick look into that. So I would definitely be sending that to you as well, so you can check it out. All right, brother. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, and we'll be in direct contact moving forward. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to follow Roman at Niche Guy. Let's see, let me go back to his page. We have Niche Guy for Roman Edmond on Twitter. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you pay attention to the Slurve chat he'll be doing, and really looking forward to a good season. So, Roman, thank you very much, and have a good day, brother.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, DFS Nation, for listening.
No problem. No problem. Take care.